The wind rolled through Willow Creek like a ghost that refused to die, lifting dust and secrets through the crooked streets. Clara Whitmore stood in the doorway of the old telegraph office, her gloved hands trembling as she folded a letter she'd never get to send. Her father was gone, murdered, though the papers called it suicide, and the men who'd done it now ruled the town he'd built. She should have been next. That's what they said in hushed tones around whiskey tables. That's what the man in the brown hat whispered to the marshal before glancing up at her window. And that's why she packed her few belongings, stole one of her father's horses, and rode out under the cloak of darkness. By dawn, a price was on her head. In a saloon on the edge of the desert, a group of hard men huddled over a wanted notice. The paper was rough, freshly printed with a sketch of Clara's face. Too soft, too innocent to look dangerous. But the bounty offered made even killers pause. Alive or dead, one of them muttered. She must have done something mighty bad. A tall figure sat in the shadows, silent, his eyes black as volcanic glass. He listened to every word but spoke none. When the paper slid across the table toward him, the men fell quiet. No one met his eyes. No one dared. The man's name was Talon, an Apache tracker who had spent years hired by white men to find what they lost: horses, gold, people. They said he never missed his mark. They also said he had no soul left to save. He studied the drawing. The woman's face meant nothing to him then, just another lost thing, another job. He nodded once, collected the coin promised for the hunt, and left without a word. 2 days later, Clara rode through the painted hills, her blue dress torn, her throat raw from thirst. She didn't know she was being followed. Every broken branch, every hoofprint she left behind told a story to the man behind her. He tracked her as easily as a wolf follows scent, but as the miles stretched, Talon began to see things that made him slow. At an old creek bed, he found where she had dismounted to drink, and left behind half her water for her horse. At a burned-out cabin, she'd buried a bird caught in the ashes, laying small stones over its body like a grave. These weren't the signs of a murderer. By nightfall, he reached a cliffside overlooking a narrow canyon. Below, she slept by a dying fire, clutching a leather satchel as if her life depended on it. The moonlight caught her hair, a pale gold that shimmered even through the dust. Something twisted in his chest, unfamiliar and unwanted. He should have taken the shot. Ended it. Walked away rich, but instead he lowered his rifle and watched. When she stirred in her sleep, whispering her father's name, Talon's jaw tightened. He'd seen fear before, seen guilt, but this was grief, real and raw. And though he'd hardened himself against pity long ago, something in her voice cracked that armor like lightning through stone. At dawn, Clara woke to find hoofprints circling her camp, fresh and wide. Someone had been there. Panic seized her chest. She grabbed her satchel and ran, heart pounding, not realizing her hunter was close enough to hear every ragged breath she took. From behind a ridge, Talon watched her vanish into the canyon mist. He should have been pleased, fear made prey careless, but instead he felt a strange pull, a question he couldn't silence. Why did they want her dead? That night, as the stars burned low over the desert, Talon sat alone beside his fire. The wanted notice lay in his hand, her face flickering in the light. He crumpled it once, then smoothed it out again, staring until the paper curled in the flames. Somewhere out there, Clara Whitmore was running for her life. And for reasons he couldn't yet name, the Apache tracker who'd been paid to erase her had just decided to find her first. The desert stretched wide and endless beneath the burning sun, its silence broken only by the cry of hawks and the slow creak of a saddle. Talon rode in steady rhythm, eyes scanning every dune, every crooked shadow. He was a man trained to read the earth the way others read scripture, and the land spoke to him in whispers, hoofprints, crushed sagebrush, a thread from a woman's torn skirt caught on thorns. He was close, ahead of him. Clara Whitmore pushed her exhausted horse through a ravine. Her lips cracked, her heartbeat wild in her throat. Every sound behind her felt like a footstep, every gust of wind like a warning. The satchel she carried thudded against her side, heavy with the papers her father had died to protect. She didn't know where she was going anymore, only that stopping meant dying. As the sun dipped low, she found a cluster of boulders near a dried-up creek and slipped down to her knees. Her horse shuddered beside her, trembling from thirst. She uncorked her flask, giving the last drops of water to the animal instead of herself. You didn't ask for this, she whispered softly, brushing its mane. Miles behind, Talon dismounted, crouching beside a faint imprint in the sand. A boot print too small for any man. He ran his thumb along its edge, then glanced toward the horizon where the trail led. Her steps were uneven now, staggering. She was wearing down. He should have felt satisfaction. But what he felt was a slow, uneasy stirring in his chest, a thing he hadn't allowed himself in years. Mercy. That night, Clara made a small fire beneath the rocks, shielding it with her shawl so no one would see the glow. Her body ached, her hands blistered, her heart raw with loneliness. She pulled out the folded papers from her satchel, bank records, land deeds, letters sealed with her father's signature. Proof that powerful men had stolen land from the Apache, murdered anyone who resisted, and made her father take the blame. Tears burned her eyes. "I'll finish what you started, Papa," she murmured. "Even if it kills me." She didn't know that above her, high on the ridge, Talon watched the faint flicker of her fire. He saw her small form, huddled in the cold, trembling but unbroken. A strange respect stirred within him. She was not the spoiled banker's daughter he'd imagined. She had grit, the kind born from pain. He sat back in the shadows, arms crossed, his mind torn between two worlds. The white men who'd hired him would come looking soon if he didn't deliver her. They'd say he'd gone soft. They'd say the Apache had betrayed them again. But Talon knew betrayal too well. He'd seen it in every treaty burned, every brother buried. And now, staring down at the woman they called a criminal, he felt something shift inside him. A decision he wasn't ready to admit. By morning, Clara's horse stumbled and fell. She cried out, rushing to its side, trying to lift its head. But the animal was too weak, its breath shallow. She stayed with it until the end, tears streaking her dust-covered cheeks. When she finally rose, her world had gone silent again. Talon stood on a ridge above her, unseen. He could hear her sobs carried on the wind. It hit him like a blade to the chest. The job was simple, bring her back or kill her. But watching her kneel beside the dead horse, hands shaking and heart breaking, he realized he could do neither. He turned away from the trail, riding down into the canyon, circling ahead. If he couldn't turn her in, then he had to make sure no one else could find her. That night, as Clara walked alone beneath a silver moon, she heard movement behind her, soft, deliberate, like the desert itself had come alive. Her hand went to the pistol she barely knew how to use. A figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, silent, his dark eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Don't move," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. Clara froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The Apache had found her. But when he looked at her, not with hunger, not with hate, she saw something else in his gaze. Conflict. And for a fleeting second she wondered if this was truly the end, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. The moon hung low over the canyon, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks. Clara Whitmore froze where she stood, her hand trembling around the grip of her pistol. Her chest heaved with fear, exhaustion, and disbelief. She had been running for days, surviving on scraps of food, half-stolen water, and sheer will. And now the man who had been hunting her, Talon, the Apache tracker, feared and whispered about in every town from Willow Creek to the desert outposts, stood before her, silent like a shadow shaped from the night itself. "Don't move," he said again, calm, measured, almost human. His dark eyes studied her face, tracing the lines of weariness, the smudges of dirt, the fear that hadn't left her since she'd fled her father's home. Clara's pistol shook in her hands. She wanted to shoot, to run, to scream. But something in the steadiness of his gaze made her pause. There was no malice there. "Not yet. You're the one they want dead," she said, her voice raw. "You—" She broke off. Words failed her. "Yes," Talon said simply. "They hired me to make you disappear." His jaw tightened. He glanced toward the canyon trail, then back at her. "But I am not going to." Clara's heart skipped. She blinked, certain she had misheard. What do you mean?" He took a careful step closer, hands relaxed, showing no threat. "I cannot kill you," he admitted quietly, almost as if confessing a sin. "I have followed your trail. I have watched you. And I know. You are not what they say you are." Her hands dropped slowly, the pistol dangling uselessly. "Not what they say?" Her voice wavered between suspicion and hope. "You mean I'm innocent?" Talon's eyes didn't leave hers. I mean, you are human, strong, fearful, yes, but you survive. You do not deserve to die for the crimes of others. His words were simple, but they struck her harder than any gunshot could. Clara swallowed. Her knees felt weak, and for the first time in days she allowed herself to stop running. She sank onto a boulder, exhausted, feeling the tension leave her body in slow, shuddering waves. I don't know what to do. They want me dead. I have nowhere to go. I can't trust anyone. Talon crouched beside her, careful not to appear threatening, yet close enough to offer protection. Then come with me, he said. I will keep you safe. No one will find you if you are with me. Her breath caught at the proposition. This was the man hired to hunt her down, the one who could have ended her life without a second thought. Yet here he was, offering her safety instead. Why would you help me? She asked, incredulous. He looked away toward the horizon, muscles tense, jaw set. Because some debts are not worth collecting. Because some lives are not meant to end in the sand. His voice was quiet, but each word carried weight. And in that quiet strength, Clara realized she could trust him. Not fully, not yet, but enough to stop running. She nodded slowly, unsure, terrified, but certain of one thing. Her life depended on this choice. I'll go with you, she whispered. Talon extended a hand. Hesitant, she took it, feeling the surprising warmth and strength in his grip. He helped her to her feet, and together they began the slow journey into the canyon. The desert night pressed in around them, silent but alive. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the cries of hawks and the soft rustle of rattlesnakes. Every step they took brought them farther from Willow Creek, and farther from the men who had tried to destroy her. And yet, Talon couldn't stop thinking about the odd twist of fate. He had been hired to erase her existence. Instead, he had chosen to protect it. A strange, unfamiliar feeling stirred in his chest, a protective instinct that went beyond duty, beyond honor. Something personal, something dangerous. As they walked side by side through the shadowed canyon, neither spoke, yet the silence was comfortable, almost intimate. The stars overhead glimmered like distant promises. And in the quiet of the desert night, for the first time in their lives, both Clara and Talon felt the fragile stirrings of hope. Not for revenge. Not for freedom, not yet, but for each other. The canyon walls rose like silent sentinels around Clara and Talon, shading them from the harsh sun and the prying eyes of the world. Dust clung to their clothes and hair, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. Yet for the first time in days, Clara felt the faintest sense of safety. She rode behind Talon, watching him move with a quiet command over the horse, over the land, over the very air itself. He seemed part of the canyon, like the cliffs and the rocks and the wind, and yet utterly human, a protector she could almost trust. They traveled in silence for hours, the crunch of hooves against gravel the only sound. Clara's legs ached and her chest still burned from days of fear and running. But with every step Talon took, she realized something. The man who had been sent to kill her now led her to life. By late afternoon, they came upon a narrow alcove hidden from the canyon's mouth. Talon dismounted and motioned for Clara to do the same. We'll stop here, he said quietly. No one will find us. Clara slid off her horse, brushing dust from her skirts. She looked around the small cave, noting its natural walls that formed a crude shelter, its proximity to a hidden spring, and the scattering of dry wood. She nodded, finally allowing herself a hint of relief. It's perfect, she whispered. Talon's eyes softened slightly at her words. He set about making the space livable, arranging stones for a fire, checking the spring, scouting the surrounding ridges. Clara watched, impressed by his skill and thoroughness. You really know this land, she said, unable to hide her admiration. I live here, he replied simply. I know every ridge, every cave, every shadow. If they try to follow us, they will find nothing but wind. Over the next few days, Clara adapted to life in hiding under Talon's guidance. He taught her how to ride quietly, how to move without leaving a trace, and how to read the signs of the land, the snapping of twigs, the footprints of animals, the whisper of the wind that could tell when someone approached. Each lesson strengthened her confidence, and slowly, fear gave way to focus. Talon, too, changed in small, imperceptible ways. He had been a man of shadows, alone and silent. Yet around Clara he found himself speaking, explaining, sometimes even laughing softly when she struggled with new skills. Her determination and courage stirred something long dormant within him. a sense of connection, a need to protect not just her life but her spirit. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls and painted the rocks gold and crimson, Clara sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of water. "I never imagined I could survive this," she admitted, her voice soft with wonder. "I always thought someone would catch me or worse, kill me, and yet here I am." Talon crouched beside the fire, cleaning his knife. He looked at her without speaking, letting her words hang in the air. "Finally," he said, "you are stronger than you know. You survived when others would have fallen. That strength, it is why I could not kill you." Clara's gaze met his, and for a moment silence passed between them that carried a weight neither had expected. She realized that Talon's protection was not just physical, it was personal. He had chosen her life, her survival, and that choice bound them in ways she was only beginning to understand. As the stars appeared one by one, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile, dangerous hope that they could survive together. The canyon had become more than a hiding place. It was the beginning of a partnership forged in fear, trust, and the unspoken understanding that they were no longer alone. By nightfall, the desert around them was quiet, save for the occasional call of a night bird or the rustle of distant animals. Clara leaned back against the warm rock and allowed herself to relax, knowing that for the first time since her father's death, she could breathe. Talon's shadow stretched across the firelight, and she knew, without words, that he would guard her with everything he had. And somewhere deep in the canyon, their journey into hiding became more than survival. It became the foundation of something neither had anticipated: trust, companionship, and the faint stirrings of love. The canyon lay quiet under a pale morning sun, the air crisp and fragrant with sage and desert flowers. Clara watched Talon move with the ease of a man born to the land, gathering firewood and checking their small perimeter. For days she had been learning the rhythms of life in hiding, how to listen to the wind, how to read the tracks of animals, and, most importantly, how to trust the man who had once been her hunter. Yet despite the growing trust, a shadow lingered over their peace. Clara knew that the outside world would not give them this sanctuary forever. The men who wanted her dead would not rest, and Talon's silence had never promised safety beyond the walls of the canyon. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged cliffs, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Talon spoke. His voice, usually reserved and steady, carried a weight that made Clara's heart skip. "Clara," he said, standing a few paces away. His dark eyes were fixed on hers, unwavering. "There is something I must do to protect you." Clara frowned, a ripple of unease passing through her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice careful. Talon stepped closer, his shadow stretching toward her in the fading light. "Among my people, a woman cannot truly be safe without the protection of her husband. The laws of my people are clear: no outsider may harm my wife. If I make you mine, no one can take you from me." Clara's breath caught. You want to marry me?" The words felt strange, impossible, yet not entirely unwelcome. "I do," he said simply, "not out of desire alone, but to keep you alive. To claim your safety in a world that wants to see you dead." His hand hovered near hers, not touching, yet conveying a promise stronger than any words. For a moment, Clara was silent. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Could she trust him completely? Was this a choice made from necessity or something deeper? Yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth there, a fierce determination to protect her, a respect she had never expected from a man who had once been her predator. Finally, she nodded. "Then, I'll do it. I'll marry you," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her decision was firm. She would not allow fear to rule her. If marriage meant safety, she would accept it, even if her heart was unsure of what it might feel. Talon's expression softened, a rare vulnerability flickering across his usually stoic face. He reached for her hand, brushing his thumb lightly over her knuckles, a touch that spoke of connection, protection, and the beginning of trust. "You are brave," he murmured, "braver than anyone I have ever met. And that bravery, it is why you will survive." The ceremony was simple, held beside the fire that had been their nightly companion. Talon's people were absent, but the canyon itself bore witness. The wind whispered through the cliffs, the stars blinked in silent approval, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. Talon spoke the vows in his tongue, solemn and deliberate. binding them together in a way that transcended law or custom. When he brushed his hand across her cheek, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. It was the first spark of intimacy between them, a silent acknowledgement that their connection had shifted from necessity to something far more potent. That night, as the fire crackled and the shadows danced across the canyon walls, Clara lay beside Talon. The bond they had formed in fear and flight had deepened into something neither had anticipated. Trust, companionship, and the first flickers of love. She felt safe in a way she hadn't since leaving Willow Creek, and she knew that whatever the outside world brought, they would face it together. In the quiet of the desert night with the stars as their witnesses, Clara Whitmore became more than a hunted woman. She became the wife of an Apache warrior, and with that, she became part of a life that promised survival, protection, and perhaps in time, love. The canyon had become their sanctuary, a place where time slowed, where danger seemed distant, and where Clara and Talon could begin to breathe without fear. But even the most secluded refuge cannot hide forever from a world that hunts relentlessly. It began with a faint glimmer of movement at the canyon's mouth one morning. Clara spotted it first, a flash of dust rising like a warning signal. Her pulse quickened. "Talon?" she whispered, her voice tight with apprehension. He turned sharply, scanning the ridges, eyes narrowing. "They've found us," he said simply. His hand went instinctively to his rifle, the weapon that had once been a tool of death for her, now a shield. The men who had hired him, the bounty hunters, mercenaries, and corrupt lawmen, were relentless. A clue, a token, a stray piece of evidence could lead them straight to her. In this case, it was her father's locket, left behind near the spring when Clara had stopped to wash her face. A careless moment, but enough to betray their hiding place. Clara's stomach knotted as the sounds of hooves approached, distant yet ominous. She clutched Talon's arm, fear and instinct intertwining. I don't know if we can." "We can," Talon interrupted firmly, his jaw set, his eyes blazing with determination. "We survived together, always." The first attack came at dawn. Dust and sunlight collided as the men rode into the canyon, rifles raised, shouting threats that echoed off the cliffs. Talon moved like a shadow, his rifle a deadly extension of his will. He fired precise shots, sending the closest riders sprawling into the sand. Clara ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding, trying to reload the pistol she barely knew how to handle. The canyon turned into chaos. Talon fought like a tempest, moving with lethal grace and terrifying efficiency. Every man who dared approach him fell back, wounded or thrown to the ground. Yet even as he defended Clara, he was hit. A bullet tore through his shoulder, sending him to one knee. Pain shot through him, sharp and burning, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to let it stop him. Clara's fear transformed into action. Though inexperienced, she aimed her pistol at the remaining riders, firing with a trembling hand but unwavering intent. "Get away from him," she shouted, the words carrying a force she didn't know she possessed. Her shots forced two men to retreat, buying Talon the moments he needed to regain his stance. When the dust settled, Talon was injured but standing. Clara rushed to his side, fumbling with torn fabric and blood-soaked sleeves as she tried to staunch the wound. "You're going to be okay," she whispered urgently, her voice shaking with emotion. "You have to be okay." Talon leaned into her touch, eyes half closed but focused. "I'm fine," he murmured, though his breathing betrayed the pain. "Because you're here. That's what matters." Clara's hands shook as she cleaned the wound, her mind racing. She had once been hunted, once defenseless, but now she realized something profound. She could fight, she could protect, and she could save the man who had saved her life. As night fell, and the attackers retreated into the distance, Clara sat beside Talon's fire, her hands pressed against his chest to warm him. They were bruised, battered, and exhausted, but alive. The canyon around them was silent once more, except for the soft crackle of the flames and the distant call of night birds. For the first time, Clara truly understood the depth of their bond. Talon had chosen her over gold, over duty, over a life he could have had without complications. He had risked everything for her, and she in turn had risked everything to keep him alive. Under the stars, Clara whispered softly, almost to herself, "We survived." Talon, his eyes heavy with pain but bright with something else, something unspoken, reached for her hand. "Together," he said simply. "Always together." The canyon, once their refuge, had been tested by fire and blood, and yet their bond had emerged stronger, tempered by danger, trust, and the knowledge that the world outside would not define the life they were building. The fire burned low, sending flickering shadows across the canyon walls, and for a brief moment, Clara and Talon sat in silence. The night was calm, almost deceptive, a fragile pause between the chaos of their past and the dangers that still lurked beyond the cliffs. Clara's fingers toyed with the edge of her satchel, the leather worn from constant handling. Her heart felt heavy, and she knew the moment had come to reveal what she had carried all along. "Talon," she began hesitantly, her voice barely more than a whisper. He looked up from the small pile of kindling he was arranging, eyes sharp and attentive. "There's something you need to know about why they want me dead." He leaned back, resting against a boulder, and studied her face. The firelight caught the lines of exhaustion and fear, softened by the courage that had carried her through so many nights. "I know some of it," he said quietly. "But tell me everything." Clara drew a deep breath and opened the satchel. Papers, ledgers, and letters spilled onto the rock between them. She pointed to the carefully stacked documents. "These are my father's records, proof of everything the men in Willow Creek and the surrounding towns did. Land theft, bribery, even murder. They wanted to silence my father, and now they want to silence me because I know too much." Talon's dark eyes scanned the documents, reading the neat, precise handwriting, the detailed accounts of stolen lands, falsified deeds, and hidden transactions. He understood immediately. This was not merely the tale of a murdered banker's daughter. This was evidence capable of destroying powerful men and revealing crimes against the Apache lands themselves. "Clara," he said slowly, voice low, "you've been carrying the key to a war you didn't even ask to be part of." His hand rested briefly on the ledgers, reverent yet protective, as though touching them could somehow expose them to danger. This is dangerous, more than even I realized." Her gaze met his, fear and determination mingling. "I didn't know who else to trust. I thought, maybe you could help me. You're strong, brave, and you know the land. I trust you with my life, Talon. But these papers, they're more than just evidence. They're a weapon." Talon's jaw tightened. He understood the implications immediately. The men who had sent bounty hunters after her weren't just interested in profit. They were protecting a network of corruption that could destroy not only Clara but countless lives, including those of his people. "Then we need to be careful," he said firmly. "If we go back to Willow Creek, it will not be easy. But if we stay hidden, we can plan and strike in a way that guarantees justice." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been running for so long, and I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know if I can survive it." Talon reached out, covering her hands with his. The touch was grounding, steady, filled with unspoken promise. "You're not alone," he said firmly. "You've never been alone. And I will not let them harm you, not now, not ever. Together we will see this through. Your father's death will not be in vain. And those who hunted you, they will face justice." For the first time since fleeing Willow Creek, Clara felt a flicker of hope that was more than survival. It was a chance at justice. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, not from fear but from relief and the dawning realization that she had someone in her corner, someone who would fight alongside her, someone who had already risked everything for her life. Talon squeezed her hands gently, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "We will need courage," he said quietly, "and patience, and we will need each other. But we can do this." Clara nodded, determination settling over her fear. She rolled up the papers and placed them back in the satchel, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Together," she echoed, her voice stronger this time. The fire crackled between them, a small beacon in the canyon's darkness, as Clara and Talon cemented a bond of trust and purpose. The danger beyond the cliffs was real, but so was the unity that had formed between them, stronger than fear, stronger than running, and strong enough to face the world that had tried to destroy them. The night sky stretched like a velvet curtain over the canyon as Clara and Talon prepared to leave their sanctuary. The stars glimmered faintly, but the quiet beauty of the desert could not mask the danger that awaited them. For weeks they had hidden, planned, and trained. Now it was time to return to Willow Creek, the town that had tried to kill Clara, the place where justice and vengeance awaited. Clara adjusted the satchel on her shoulder, filled with her father's records. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. This was determination. "I still can't believe we're doing this," she whispered. Talon, mounted and alert, gave a low, steady nod. "It's the only way," he said. "If we do this right, the town will see the truth. If we wait, they'll bury it forever, and if anyone tries to stop us, we will be ready." They rode through the canyon at dawn, shadows stretching long behind them. The journey was tense, each ridge and valley scanned for signs of pursuit. Talon led them through secret passes, places few outsiders had ever seen, ensuring that the men who had hunted Clara before would not anticipate their return. By midday, the outskirts of Willow Creek appeared on the horizon. The familiar shapes of the saloons, the general store, and the courthouse brought a sharp ache to Clara's chest. Memories of her father, of whispered threats, of fleeing in terror all flooded back. Yet with Talon beside her, the fear was tempered by resolve. "We go in together," Talon said, his voice low but commanding. "You present the evidence. I will make sure no one stops you." Clara nodded, swallowing her nerves. They approached the courthouse cautiously, Talon keeping to the shadows while she moved toward the front. Inside, she faced a room full of town officials, some with startled eyes, others with guarded hostility. She laid the papers on the judge's desk, her voice steady despite the tension. "These documents prove the crimes of those in power. They murdered my father and stole from my family, and from the Apache people. Justice must be served." A murmur rippled through the room. Faces turned pale, hands trembled, and whispers grew louder. But one man, the wealthy rancher who had profited most from the corruption, rose abruptly, his eyes narrowing. "You have no proof," he sneered. "These papers are forged." Clara held her ground, heart pounding. "They are not. Every signature, every ledger entry is real. You cannot deny the truth." Before the situation could escalate further, Talon stepped forward from the shadows, his presence commanding and undeniable. The room fell silent. "Do not touch her," he said in a low, controlled voice. "She speaks the truth, and anyone who harms her will answer to me." The rancher's men hesitated, recognizing the reputation of the Apache warrior who stood before them. Talon's dark eyes glinted with warning. Clara, bolstered by his support, continued her testimony, presenting evidence and recounting her father's story. Tensions exploded when one of the rancher's men lunged for the papers, trying to snatch them. Talon moved with lightning speed, disarming him and forcing him to the ground. The room erupted into chaos, but the townspeople saw something they had never witnessed before. Courage, truth, and the force of justice in action. By nightfall, the corrupt men were exposed, some arrested, some fleeing in disgrace. The judge finally accepted the evidence, acknowledging that justice demanded action. Clara stood with Talon at her side, her heart pounding but triumphant. She had faced the place that had haunted her nightmares, and with Talon she had emerged victorious. As they left the courthouse, Talon offered his arm. Clara took it, the weight of the satchel and the day's events lightened by their shared strength. The town that had once tried to destroy her had been forced to recognize her power, her courage, and the bond between her and the man who had once hunted her. Together, they rode back toward the canyon, leaving behind the ashes of corruption and the first sparks of freedom. The road ahead was uncertain, but with each other they knew they could face whatever came next. The air in Willow Creek was thick with tension as Clara and Talon approached the ranch where her enemies had gathered. The corrupt rancher, realizing the threat she posed, had taken Clara hostage in a desperate bid to protect himself. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the fields as Talon's dark eyes scanned the land with unerring precision. Every ridge, every doorway, every silhouette was accounted for. "They've taken her inside," Talon murmured, his voice like steel. His hand rested on his rifle, but it was more than a weapon, it was a promise. "Stay close. Don't make a sound." Clara's stomach twisted with fear and fury. "We can't let them get away with this," she said, gripping her father's papers. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was unbreakable. She had come too far to be turned away now. They moved through the shadows, silent as the wind circling the ranch. Talon's knowledge of the land and his people's ways gave him an almost supernatural advantage. He scaled the fences, slipped through the barns, and finally found the back entrance. Clara followed, heart hammering, every nerve alert. Inside she saw him, her captor, smug and overconfident, standing with the papers in hand. The men surrounding him laughed, confident that Clara's voice would no longer matter, but Talon did not hesitate. With a fierce cry, he stormed the room, gunfire ripping through the air. The ranch hands scrambled, unprepared for the speed and ferocity of an Apache warrior defending the woman he had vowed to protect. Clara ducked behind a crate, watching Talon move like a storm. Every shot was precise, every step calculated. The men fell back, disarmed, or fled in terror. Talon's presence was overwhelming, commanding attention, fear, and respect all at once. The rancher lunged for Clara, but Talon intercepted him with a force that sent him sprawling. Clara rushed forward, snatching the papers back. She felt the weight of truth in her hands, the evidence of her father's life, and the legacy of justice she was reclaiming. Talon's dark eyes met hers, and in that instant everything aligned, the danger, the fear, the adrenaline. They were no longer hunter and prey. They were partners, equals, bound by survival, trust, and the promise of justice. With the ranchers subdued and the corrupt men scattered, Talon secured Clara and the evidence. The authorities, now aware of the situation, arrived just in time to witness the aftermath. The rancher and his accomplices were arrested, the stolen lands documented and restored, and the corruption that had plagued Willow Creek exposed for all to see. Clara's heart pounded, not from fear but from relief and triumph. She had faced the men who tried to destroy her, survived the threats and violence, and emerged victorious with Talon by her side. As they rode away from the ranch under the first stars of evening, Clara felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The danger was not entirely gone. There would always be threats, always shadows. But for the first time she felt in control of her destiny. And she knew she was not alone. Talon rode beside her, steady, silent, and resolute. His hand found hers on the reins, a simple touch that carried all the weight of their journey. Protection, devotion, and a growing, undeniable love. Clara squeezed his hand in return, the bond between them stronger than ever. They rode into the canyon, leaving the town, the ranch, and the threats behind. The desert stretched before them, wide and open, full of possibility. They had faced the darkness together, survived, and now had the chance to define their future. That night, as they set up camp beneath the stars, Clara sat beside Talon and looked up at the sky, feeling the crisp desert air fill her lungs. She was free, not just from her enemies, but from fear. And beside her, Talon rested, silent and steadfast, the guardian of her life and heart. For the first time, Clara realized that the woman who had once been hunted had become unstoppable, and the man who had once hunted her had become her partner in everything, her protector, her love, her home. The canyon was quiet under the soft glow of dawn, the first light stretching across the rugged cliffs and golden sands. Clara Whitmore sat atop a boulder, brushing dust and sweat from her hair, and for the first time in months she felt a calm she hadn't known since her father's death. The trials, the betrayals, the fear, they were behind her now, replaced by something deeper, something steady, the life she had fought to reclaim. Talon moved silently nearby, tending to their small camp. Even wounded in past battles, he carried an aura of strength that was impossible to ignore, a quiet command of the land and their lives together. He glanced at her, dark eyes softening as he caught her watching him. Without a word, he came to sit beside her, their shoulders brushing. "You're quiet this morning," he said, his voice low, steady. "I'm thinking," Clara replied, "about everything, about how far we've come, about what we've survived, and about us." Her gaze dropped to the canyon floor below, tracing the paths they had ridden together, paths that had once been filled with fear and danger. Talon's hand found hers, their fingers entwining easily, naturally. "We survived," he said simply, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "And now, we live." Clara nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, not from sadness but from the weight of relief and gratitude. She had been hunted, betrayed, and almost destroyed, yet here she was, alive, whole, and safe in the arms of the man who had once been sent to kill her. They rode down into the canyon together, the horses steady and sure, the path beneath them familiar and welcoming. The town of Willow Creek was behind them, its corruption exposed and its power broken. But more importantly, Clara no longer carried the shadow of fear. It had been replaced by trust, partnership, and love. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Talon teaching her the ways of the land, the tracks of animals, the language of the wind. She learned to move quietly, to read the desert, to become part of a world that had once been alien and frightening. And in return, Talon opened himself to her presence, allowing glimpses of a heart that had long been closed, teaching her the depth of patience, strength, and loyalty. Days turned to weeks, and Clara began to see the beauty in the life they had carved together. The sunrises painted the cliffs in gold and red, the nights shimmered with stars, and every sound of the desert, call of a hawk, rustle of the sagebrush, whisper of wind through the canyon, felt like a part of her, a part of them. One evening, as the fire burned low and the desert stars reflected in their eyes, Clara turned to Talon. "I never thought I'd have a life like this," she said softly. "Safe, free, loved. You have it now," Talon replied, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Because you survived. Because you fought. And because you trusted me." Clara leaned against him, letting the warmth of his presence soothe the remnants of fear in her chest. She thought of her father, of the price of his life, and felt a fierce gratitude that she could honor him not just by surviving, but by living fully, fiercely, and without compromise. The canyon held them, a silent witness to their journey, from hunted and hunter to partners, to a couple bound by trust, courage, and love. There would be challenges, shadows lurking in distant lands, but together they were unstoppable. As dawn broke once more over the canyon, Clara and Talon rose, ready to face the new day. She was no longer a hunted woman, no longer a victim. She was alive, free and whole, his wife, his partner, and the woman who had survived it all. And with Talon at her side, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, stronger, braver, and inseparably united. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a world of possibilities, and Clara finally understood what it meant to truly live.